My name's Chuck Dorr. I'm 78 years old. I started in Toledo, Ohio in 1944. I was born in August. My father was in the service. My mother was a nurse in Toledo, Ohio. And I'm the first of three children. My father, Earl, and my mother, Marcia, were very happy, all-American people that just lived the dream in the central part of the United States. My father, shortly after I was born, went overseas to Germany, and he was a captain in the artillery section of the Army, and he eventually came out as a major. But he came back in 1945, and then we moved to Detroit, and we started our life together in Detroit. My father started with a paint company, a local paint company there that he stayed with his whole life. He ended up working, going to California as a regional manager, and he became a national sales manager for Acme Paint, which is a Sherwin-Williams division company. But we had a great life. My brother is 3 years, 3 months younger than I am. My sister is 3 years, 3 months younger than he is. They had apparently some kind of a schedule worked out, and it seemed to work for them. But we had a great life. We really enjoyed it. I was principally brought up in Detroit. When I was 12, we moved to California. And so my preteen or my teen years and my after graduation from high school was spent in Southern California, which was a wonderful place to grow up in the 60s. It was a fantastic place, a lot of sun, a lot of activities, a lot of freedom. You could go to the beach. You could hitchhike to the beach with safety without having to worry about it. I mean, those were wonderful times. And for that reason, I've always kind of felt like I was from California. When I was out of high school, we moved to Colorado, where my dad took over a national position with the company. And I stayed in Colorado for over 30 years. So I really have spent most of my life in Colorado. That's where my wife and my two daughters live and my four grandsons. I have four unmarried grandsons, no great-grandchildren yet. Don't know if I'll ever have any, but the four boys are doing fairly well, and we're pretty proud of them, and nice to see them. Don't spend a lot of time talking to them. They've got their own stuff going on, but I'm very proud of my two daughters. They've got great lives and great things that they're doing with their lives, and so it's really a good thing. When I moved back from California to Colorado, I did go to school. I went to Colorado State University. I was there, I think, 4 semesters. I wasn't particularly good at it. This was in 1964. And so I decided at that point in time that I was going to take some time off, get a job, and kind of reconnoiter what I was going to do with my college stuff. And so by the time I got back home to Littleton, Colorado, which was about 70 miles south, my mother had my draft papers in her hand that had been sent from my draft board in California. So at that point in time, decisions had to be made. I went down and I joined the Naval Reserve rather than answer my call from the draft board. And so I joined the Navy at that point in time, and I started doing my reserve stuff and things like that. So that's where I was trained. Eventually in 1966, they called me to active duty. I went to Philadelphia and then to Norfolk, Virginia. And the unusual part about that is my reserve unit, out of 120 guys, only 2 people went to the East Coast. I was one of those 2 people. Everybody else went to the West Coast and ultimately got sent to Vietnam in some form or fashion. So I was very fortunate to go to the East Coast. I would have gone west if I had to, but that wasn't my calling. So I was stationed on a ship in Norfolk, Virginia. I played football for that ship because we had a very good football team. And so I was injured playing football for them. I had 2 operations on my knee, and they ultimately put me out of the service in '68 with a disability because I could no longer perform my full responsibilities. While I was in the Navy, I was in the weather service. At that time, we used to take teletype messages from stations all over the East Coast and we would plot them on a huge blank map. And then once you've plotted them on the map, well, you could take the millibars of mercury for the barometric pressure and draw guidelines through the map and develop an entire map that you see on television now out of the computers, while we were developing those all by hand. But by the time I came back, I was married. I had a little girl that was born in 1968. And so we just weren't going to be able to go back to school and spend our time doing that. We had to find a job. And I remember my first drafting job when I got out of the Navy was for $4 an hour. I worked, made 160 a week, and we lived in a little apartment, had a car that we had bought while we were in the service, and life was grand. I mean, we had all the money we'd ever needed, $160 a week. So from that point on, why it was just kind of moving on into the drafting engineering life, and I've had a lot of jobs, but it seems like every time I had an opportunity after a couple or 3 years, somebody offered me a job to do something a little different. And I used my experience to learn from that and move on up to the direction that I wanted to be. Well, once I started doing the drafting work, I ended up getting a job for Kiewit, and it was to survey a dam that they were building in the Denver area. I had a transit and a level, and I was supposed to lay out this large outlet structure for this dam that they were building, doing all the elevations and things like that, and making sure that they were built according to the way they were supposed to build. We also had to lay out the outlet structure for draining the dam. Once the water filled up, you open certain gates and you drain water out of it. And I'm pretty sure that one of those gates got put in there 1 foot off. I laid it out wrong. And I don't think anybody ever found out about that. It actually all worked just fine. So I was able to skate by that whole thing. But that Kiewit experience transitioned into going up to Vail Pass. I built 6 sets of bridges, substructures on bridges up there. And we had about 3 years out of town working on heavy highway bridge work and things like that. From that point, I decided construction work was too much out of town stuff and too much working in the wintertime. So I went back to Denver and I scored a job as a sales rep for a concrete company. And so I was selling concrete to the heavy and highway contractors, but I was on the sales side of things. And so I worked at that for quite a long time. After several years of working for this company, there was a fellow there that was a very entrepreneurial guy. He flew P-38s during World War II, and he was just a kind of bigger than life guy. He owned this concrete company. And he says, I think we want to get into the concrete paving business. He says, why don't you go out and do a survey of 4 or 5 states and find out how different states feel about the possibility of doing concrete paving as opposed to asphalt paving. So I went on the road and I talked to, I think, 178 city engineers, Chamber of Commerce people, public works people, and developed a determination that there was a market for promoting concrete paving for their local paving work instead of asphalt because of the maintenance required to take care of the asphalt. So I sold asphalt, and we started a company called Mountain States Paving, and I was named the president of that company. And I ran it with about 47 employees that we had. We had several large pieces of paving equipment. We did interstate highway paving up in Evanston, Wyoming. We did parking lot paving in Grapevine, Texas. We did a lot of work around Denver doing parking lots and things like that. So it was a pretty successful venture, and I really enjoyed doing it. It was very, very fulfilling to be able to do that. And it was very successful. We had a good run at it. At one point, the owner of the company decided he wanted his son more involved in the company, and he brought him in as my vice president. And he and I didn't get along, and it was either my way or the highway. So I hit the highway, and I moved back to California. Took a job as a sales rep in the concrete business in California. I worked in Southern California for about 5 years, and Southern California just got too crowded. It wasn't the way I remembered it. I wasn't having a good time. I had 14 concrete plants all over the Los Angeles area, and I was traveling to most of them every day. So I was spending a lot of time on the road, on the freeways, sitting on the freeways. And I finally decided to look a little bit and see if there was another opportunity somewhere else. And I found a company up in Sacramento that was a family-owned company. It's still a family-owned company named Tykert. And I solicited a job with them, and they hired me. And I went up and I went to work with them as a sales manager of their precast division, making precast manholes and things like that. And then within a year, they selected me to be the vice president of their aggregate and asphalt division. So I transitioned from selling concrete back to asphalt again. So now asphalt was the best product in the world. Stay away from those concrete guys. So anyway, that was a shock for my kids. They said, "Oh, Dad, you went to the other side," you know. But it was a good life. I retired from Tykert in 2008 after being with them for a little over 10 years, and moved to Colorado again in Green Valley. We split time. My wife Dennis and I were married in 2004, and we've had a great life ever since. When I came down here in 2008, I recognized that I probably needed something to kind of fulfill my time. I can only play so much golf. I knew I played a lot of golf when I was in the business, in the concrete business. So I was able to take people. My last station was actually up in Lake Tahoe area and Reno. So I could go up and spend 2 days a week playing golf with customers, entertaining them that way and things like that. So that was a really great life. But I knew that I was never going to be able to play more than 2 days golf of a week. So when we moved down here to Green Valley, and I actually learned of Green Valley from a group of guys that I was in the concrete business with in Colorado. We were standing around, I think it was at a Christmas or a New Year's party one year, and thought, geez, we haven't been able to get out and play any golf in Colorado. It's been a lot of snow and very cold and stuff. So why don't we all just jump in the car and drive down to Arizona and play golf for a weekend? So we did that. We took off. There was 8 of us. We took off and got to Phoenix 1 year, and we stayed at the Embassy Suites. We shared rooms, and they had a deal where if you had bought a room and stayed 2 of you to a room for $100 a night, you do that, and it included 1 round of golf the next day. So it really kind of set us up to do that. So we did that one weekend. Well, long story short, we ended up doing that for 20 years. We ultimately got down here to Green Valley. We started playing all the Green Valley golf courses, staying down here at the Best Western. And I had met my wife, whose mother lived here. She had a home here. And so it turned out that once I had a place to stay down here, they stopped coming down. So that was the end of the sojourn down to Green Valley. But once I determined that playing golf wasn't going to be the end all for me, I decided I had to find something to do. So I went to work for SAV. I went through their training program. That's the Sheriff's Auxiliary Volunteers here in Green Valley. They perform some very good function for safety and community outreach for working for the Sheriff's Department. And so I was with them for 9 years. My last job for them, I was the supervisor of bailiffs in the local county court. So when we had a jury trial, or if we had any kind of a goings on at the sheriff thing, why we had to schedule 2 bailiffs to be there at any given time. And so I was responsible for making sure that there was somebody on duty at any time that they needed it. After about 9 years of that, I had kind of enough of that kind of work. We had a class when we did our training, and there were 20-some people in the class. And by 9 years, a lot of them had stopped working or had passed on. And so the old group, the old gang wasn't there anymore. So I left and I went over to Friends Indeed. A lady that I knew was the operations manager of Friends Indeed. They needed dispatchers and drivers. So I started dispatching for them and driving. Friends Indeed is an organization that takes seniors here in Green Valley, and they'll deliver them to doctors and dental appointments or legal appointments. We have volunteer drivers here in Green Valley that will pick them up at home, take them to their appointment, wait for them, pick them up, and bring them back home again. We have 2 wheelchair vans that we have volunteer drivers that will take people in wheelchairs to do the same things. And we have a warehouse of medical equipment, durable medical equipment that we loan to people. So if you're going to have hip surgery and you need a walker and a toilet riser for a period of time while you're recuperating, you can borrow them from us for 60 days at no cost, bring them back, we sanitize everything and put them back on the shelf for the next person that has a need. So this organization has captured my heart, really. I love being a part of it. A couple of years ago, they asked me to be on the board of directors, and I agreed to do that. And the following year, while the guy that was the president had to move on for health reasons, and they asked me to be the president. So I've been the president of Friends Indeed for a little over a year now. We've got 140 volunteers that we work with. We did 54,000 miles of transportation in personal vehicles last year. We did around 1,500 trips between Tucson and Green Valley. So we've got a great organization for putting together people. A lot of people have their heart really in it. It's really a good outfit. So I really think that having so many different positions in my lifetime, I've had many people that I work for or with, and many of them were really, really good, and some of them were really, really bad. But I think that I've been able to discern and take something away from each and every relationship I've ever had. So for me, being a manager, being a person who's kind of in charge, my in charge has got to be a very subtle thing. I don't want to be the face and the voice of Friends Indeed. I want the organization to stand on its own. I want to just help direct it and make it a better place to be. So my management style, when I had salespeople, and I had 14 salespeople working for me in California, it was all about trying to make them better at what they did. I wanted to teach them. I wanted to give them a style, and I wanted them to learn the best way to do things. And I'd give them a task. I just feel like if you give somebody a task, then you can't browbeat them and make sure they do it the right way. The best way is to turn them loose and say, look, we'll look at this 6 months from now, and if it's not working for you, you tell me what part's not working, and we'll tweak it and figure out how to make it better. But it was just really important for me to have people learn and be able to understand how to work through problems themselves. And that's kind of how I've always handled it. I try not to be heavy-handed about the way I work with people. I try to give them suggestions. I try to give them options. I try to let them select the thing that's going to work best for them. Because I've found a long time ago, if somebody puts me in a position where I have to be the guy that drives the train, then there's nobody around you that's doing anything but standing there watching you drive the train. And so that's just not ever been a good formula for me in the relationships and the people that I work with. A lot of people along the way have looked at that and thought, well, he's really not the leader we expected him to be, because they envision the leader to be the lion in the cage, and I want to be the lion tamer and let the lions do their own thing.